Welcome back to my channel. I kind of wanted to do a follow-up video from my last video that kind of showed you some of the things you're going to need to start getting into this hobby and 3D printing. But today I wanted to show you some of the tools that you're going to need to start cleaning those 3D prints up and get them looking something like this guy. So I just wanted to share with you some of the essential tools that I use to help get those 3D prints really looking good, really looking sharp. So let's get to it and let me show you. Alrighty guys, so here we are with some of the tools that you are going to need to get started working on that 3D print of yours. And we're just going to assume from our last video that you got your 3D printer, that you got your software, and that you got your first print off the bed. Well, that's just the beginning. When you get your first print off the bed, you got to start cleaning it up. And we'll just say that this is your first print off the bed. This is a Robocop helmet, at least the top of the helmet. And when it comes off, you have these fine layer lines here that you need to fill in and smooth out. Now, there's a bunch of ways of doing it. You can just start sanding down the structure as is. The problem I have with that is that when you start sanding these lines down without any kind of filler primer or anything, you're actually sanding down some of the structure, and I think you're actually making it weaker than what it should be. So I like to leave the lines as is and just start putting filler primer on it and building up that surface to fill in those layer lines. Now, of course, when you start sanding it, you're going to sand those layer lines down a little bit, but you're not going to really grind them down as if you were just to first jump into it and start sanding all these lines down. Build up the surface, smooth it out. But anyway, so that's what we got. We got our Robocop helmet. We got some layer lines we need to start filling in. So what tools do we essentially need to get that 3D print smooth? Well, I'm going to introduce you to your new best friend, and that is sandpaper. Now, if you're going to go with sandpaper, go with the best sandpaper and buy 3M brand. I get this sandpaper at Lowe's. The lowest grit I go is about 180. I don't like to go too low. Again, I don't want to sand down too much of the structure. I go up to 220, and I finish off with 320 and sometimes 400. But I find 320 to be a good median in between 220 and 400. So 320 is about the highest I usually go to smooth everything out. So you need sandpaper. I sand everything by hand usually. I just rip pieces off and everything by hand. I have this sanding block here, but I really do not use it. I just put it out here in case you want to use it as an option and it might be a little easier for you. I don't really use it very much. I use these on other projects, but not really 3D printing. But that is an option to have in your toolbox. But this itself is an absolute must. Another option is an Orbital palm sander. A lot of people use these. I don't really use them very much on my 3D prints, but it is an option. You can get these pretty cheap at Harbor Freight, maybe $10, $20. I'm sure with COVID prices right now, it's a little more expensive. It is an option. It helps, you know, real flat surfaces or rounded surfaces. It works pretty good, but like getting into fine details, this is useless. So I don't really use it that much. It also gets the PLA real hot, so you can kind of warp and maybe eat into it a little more than you want to. So I don't use it very much. But again, an option for you if you want it. Moving on to your new best friend, and now it's its close associate, and its close associate is filler primer. These are the two brands I use. This is cheaper than this one, so I like to intertwine these two just because I save a few bucks. You don't have to do that. You can use one or the other. My favorite is this one. It sands like butter. It sands crazy smooth. This one's a little harder to sand. It likes to gunk up on your sandpaper a little bit, and I feel like this fills in a little better than this one, but they both work great. I intertwine them, so yes, you're going to need lots of filler primer for your projects. Depending on the project, on something small, you might only need 1 can. For my Robocop suit, the whole suit, I probably used somewhere in between 10 to 20 cans. I don't know the exact number, but I used a lot of cans. So yeah, good stuff. You absolutely need it to start cleaning up your 3D prints. Moving on here is Bondo glazing and spot putty. This is great to fill in the stuff that this doesn't fill in, because this is not going to get everything. This will fill in some of your surface. You could even smooth it out perfect with this stuff sometimes. But on your 3D prints, you'll get some rougher surfaces like this, and filler primer really isn't going to completely do the job. So that's where glazing spot putty comes in by 3M Bondo. And you start rubbing all of that all on these rough surfaces, or if you have any around the other part of the model. And I also found that plastic metal is really good. It's very similar to this one. I kind of intertwine these also. This one dries faster, it dries harder, and you can fill in deeper gouges, deeper scratches with this one. And you don't have to do as many layers of buildup as you would with this one. So they're great to use. Intertwine them like the filler primers if you want. You don't need this one at all if you don't want. I just found it at Walmart. I'm starting to really like it, so I use both. Moving on is my good old X-Acto knife and a razor blade. These are just great to have to cut away excess PLA, or you know, sometimes the lines like to stick out, or you know, break off supports with them. They're just good to have. Even cleaning up fine details, I found an X-Acto knife to be good for that. This, you don't absolutely need it for 3D printing. You know, it's more optional. I just highly recommend it, especially if you're into props, to have a Dremel tool. It's been one of my best friends in prop building. It just kind of does everything. It's just a little rotary tool, extremely dependent rotary tool. I've had this for probably 10 years, I want to say, give or take, and it still works. It works perfectly. You could see my grungy old Dremel box here, my kit that I kind of randomly fill in here and there, and just has some of the bits that you can use. I've found sanding drums to be great for PLA every now and then. Cutting discs are great for, you know, if you need to cut a piece off, modify something. They have drill bits, they have diamond tools where you can really use the rotary tool to get in and clean up those fine details. It's a great tool to have. Do you absolutely need it? No, but it's great to have. Highly recommend. Another essential tool you're going to need is super glue. Now, all of your prints aren't going to be able to fit on your bed. Or let's say you're starting with an Ender. The Ender is a little bit of a smaller bed. It's not the smallest 3D printer bed. You can get some pretty large prints off of it. But a lot of the times, especially with a Robocop suit, you're going to have to get into your software or find a software that's going to have to cut that model up into multiple pieces. So let's just say you have this helmet here. This helmet for an Ender would probably have to be cut into either 2 pieces straight across, or this way, or you can cut it into 4 pieces. And when you have those pieces come off your bed, however you put it on there, you're going to have to super glue it together. Now, I've already done one of my first videos kind of showing you what I do. This is the super glue brand I love, and I found it to always be faithful, and it just works great on all my projects. I've used it for years on styrene projects. It has a really strong bond in comparison to other super glues. I've tried other super glues. This is one in particular I've tried, and it's absolutely terrible. Don't recommend it for 3D printing. There's other super glues I've tried, and they're also terrible in terms of having a strong bond on your 3D prints, but I have always found this one to be grade A, perfect for what I needed. You can get these at the Dollar Tree. They run, of course, $1 for a 2-pack. I usually buy about 5, 6, 7 when I make my trips to Dollar Tree. They're always just great to have on hand when you're doing large projects. If you're just going to do small stuff, miniatures, you might not need it. But for large projects, you will need it to glue pieces together. Moving on, we're going to go to wood filler. Now this is another one you don't need. It's just a tool I like to use. Sometimes I get tired of the odors, and for real large stuff that's really kind of rough on the lines, I like to just do a nice layer of this. When you buy it, it comes pretty thick, so I don't use it with the thickness it comes in or the viscosity it comes in. I'll add water into it to thin it out. And then I like to get a brush and just kind of brush it onto my 3D prints. So I got that idea from Nico Industries, from his 3D printing channel. Extremely helpful, extremely resourceful. I highly recommend you guys checking him out. The next thing, moving on, is Magic Sculpt. This stuff has always been great to have. As you can tell, it's real old and grungy. But it's just a 1-1 mix epoxy putty. That, you know, you get one little ball here, one little ball there, mix it together, and you can use it to just fill in deep gouges. Inevitably, when you get these prints and you're working on them, you're going to drop them. Sometimes they're going to crack, sometimes they're going to break. I super glue those pieces back together, and sometimes there'll be little holes or gouges from the break, and I like to use this stuff to fill that in, and that just helps give it a little bit of a stronger structure than what it had before, because in between this, there's some infill, and I don't really do a super high infill. I do probably about a 20%, 25% infill. So when I do get breaks, I like to use that to fill it in. You can also use this stuff to sculpt in details, sharpen up details. It's extremely useful. Do you need it? Absolutely not, but it is great to have. So yeah, your absolute essentials you're going to need for this is definitely your sandpaper, your filler primers, your super glue, your glazing spot putties, and one other thing I forgot to mention is these microfiles. I highly recommend having these microfiles. They're great to sharpen up the small details, smooth them out, clean them out. Great tool to have. These are really cheap. You can get these at Harbor Freight or Walmart for under $10. Yes, great to have. So yeah, guys, I hope this helps you out. Those are the tools that you're going to need, and I hope to see some of you get started and turn this rough looking thing into something like this. So it can be done, and these are the tools that you're going to need to get started with that. Most of this stuff here, I didn't really do a price thing because it's not super expensive. All the essential stuff you need is probably going to be under $50 just to get started with. Now, of course, it's going to be a little more if you're doing a RoboCop suit. You're going to have to buy a lot of filler primers. Sometimes I just start with 2 or 3 until I need them, and then I go pick some up the next time I go to the hardware store or the automotive store. So yeah, please comment below if you have any questions. You know, I'll get to you. I'll answer to the best of my ability. I don't know everything. This is just what I use. This is what works for my projects. There's other guys that have different methods that work for them. Those might be helpful for you. But this works for me. It has worked for me, and I don't plan on changing it anytime soon. I'm not saying I won't ever change my methods. You know, I like to try new things sometimes, but this works. I keep using it, and I'm going to keep using it. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one.